Juan Manuel Fangio is a name that still carries a certain reverence whenever discussions about the greatest Formula One drivers of all time are brought up. He was the dominant figure of the 1950s, the man whose record of 5 world championships stood untouched for nearly half a century until Michael Schumacher finally surpassed it in 2004 and Lewis Hamilton later in 2020. For many, Fangio is the archetypal driver of F1's earliest decade, the hero whose smoothness behind the wheel and tactical brilliance helped him win races at an age where most modern drivers would already be in retirement. But just how good was Fangio really? Was he the undisputed master of the early days of Formula One, or was he more a beneficiary of being in the right place at the right time? To answer that question, we need to look not only at Fangio's achievements on paper, but also at the context of the era, the machinery, the level of competition, and the sheer dangers of motorsport at that time. Fangio was born in 1911 in Balcarce, a small town in Argentina. Like many of his contemporaries, his path into racing was not one of privilege, but of sheer determination and mechanical know-how. He began as a mechanic, and his first racing exploits came in long-distance endurance events across the vast stretches of Argentina. These races, known as carreteras, were not the carefully manicured circuits of Europe, but brutal tests of both man and machine across gravel, dirt, and open public roads that could stretch for hundreds of miles. It was here that Fangio first demonstrated his uncanny ability to preserve machinery, to read a race tactically, and to maintain concentration for endless hours under punishing conditions. These skills would serve him well in Formula One, where car reliability and driver mechanical sympathy often determined who made it to the checkered flag. By the time Fangio arrived in Europe in the late 1940s, he was already in his late 30s, an age when most modern drivers would be entering the twilight of their careers. Yet Fangio was just beginning his ascent. Formula One as a championship officially began in 1950, but Grand Prix racing had already been an established pursuit in Europe since the 1920s and 1930s. Fangio quickly made a name for himself with Alfa Romeo, the dominant team in the inaugural championship season. In 1950 he won 3 races, but ultimately lost the title to his teammate Giuseppe Farina. Fangio, however, had made it clear he was a force to be reckoned with. What stands out most in Fangio's career is his consistency across multiple teams. He drove for Alfa Romeo, Maserati, Mercedes and Ferrari, and he won championships with 4 different constructors, a record that remains unmatched to this day. To put that into perspective, even in the modern era of longer seasons and more opportunities, no driver has managed to replicate that feat. Schumacher's dominance was tied to Ferrari, Hamilton's to Mercedes, Vettel's to Red Bull, and Verstappen's to Red Bull. Fangio, however, could win in anything. This ability to adapt to different cars, different engineers, and different philosophies of design is perhaps the single strongest argument for his greatness. His first championship came in 1951 with Alfa Romeo. The 159 Alfetta was a car that had its roots in pre-war designs, essentially an evolution of the machines that had dominated the 1930s. It was monstrously powerful for the time, but also fragile and thirsty. Fuel stops were frequent, and tire wear was a constant concern. Fangio's ability to manage these factors, to drive fast yet preserve the car, made the difference in tight races. After Alfa Romeo withdrew, Fangio moved to Maserati in 1953, but the turning point of his career came with Mercedes' return to Grand Prix racing in 1954. Mercedes arrived with the W196, a car that was years ahead of its rivals. With fuel-injected straight-8 engines, sleek streamliner bodywork on some circuits, and unparalleled engineering precision, the W196 was a masterpiece. Fangio immediately made the most of it, winning the title in 1954 and again in 1955. But even here, context matters. Some critics argue that Fangio benefited enormously from always having the best machinery. Indeed, in many seasons, he did find himself in the most competitive car. Yet it is also true that he deliberately put himself in those positions. Fangio was not shy about switching teams mid-season if he felt another team had built a faster machine. In 1954, for example, he began the year with Maserati, but when Mercedes entered the fray, Fangio made the jump and promptly won. In today's world, such a move might be criticized as opportunistic, but in Fangio's time, it was seen as a pragmatic and intelligent career decision. After all, safety was minimal and careers could end in a split second. Why not maximize one's chances when opportunities arose? Still, it would be unfair to suggest Fangio was merely a passenger in superior machinery. His performance at the 1957 German Grand Prix at the Nurburgring is often cited as one of the greatest drives in the history of motorsport. Driving a Maserati 250F, Fangio started on pole but lost time during a disastrous pit stop. At one point, he trailed the Ferrari duo of Mike Hawthorne and Peter Collins by over 40 seconds. What followed was a display of speed and precision that remains legendary. Fangio pushed the Maserati to the absolute limit, breaking the lap record multiple times in succession, each lap faster than the last, as he hunted down the Ferraris. On the penultimate lap, he overtook both Collins and Hawthorne and secured victory. The drive was so astonishing that even his rivals acknowledged its brilliance. Fangio himself later said it was the greatest race of his life, and many historians regard it as the definitive proof of his supreme ability. But one must also weigh Fangio's achievements against the level of competition. The 1950s grid was smaller, and the pool of top-tier talent was arguably thinner than in later decades. Many drivers were part-timers, wealthy amateurs, or lacked the resources to compete on equal terms. However, Fangio did go up against formidable names: Alberto Ascari, Giuseppe Farina, Stirling Moss, and later drivers like Hawthorne and Collins. Ascari in particular was a true rival, and for a brief period in the early 1950s, Ascari looked set to be the dominant figure of the decade until his tragic death in 1955. Stirling Moss, often regarded as the greatest driver never to win a championship, was frequently Fangio's teammate and competitor. Moss himself admitted that while he considered himself fast, Fangio always seemed to have an extra gear, an intangible edge that separated him from the rest. Another factor that must be considered is Fangio's age. He was well into his 40s during his championship years, and by modern standards, that is remarkable. To be competing at the very top of the sport at such an age, in an era with no power steering, no seatbelts, no crash protection, and immense physical demands, speaks volumes about his conditioning and mental strength. Most modern drivers peak in their late 20s or early 30s. Fangio was winning championships at an age when most would have retired. This longevity further underlines his uniqueness. Fangio's driving style was also distinctive. He was smooth, calculated, and rarely reckless. In an age where many drivers approached races with a win-or-die mentality, Fangio emphasized finishing and consistency. His mechanical sympathy allowed him to push just enough to preserve the car while still delivering speed when it mattered. His career finishing rate was astonishing compared to many of his contemporaries who often succumbed to mechanical failure or accidents. It was not simply luck. It was a reflection of his intelligence behind the wheel. He treated racing as a game of strategy, not just brute speed. Of course, no evaluation would be complete without acknowledging the dangers of the era. Fangio raced in a time when fatalities were tragically common. Circuits had little to no safety features, cars lacked seatbelts and roll cages, and medical response was primitive. Fangio himself survived several serious accidents, including a near-fatal crash at Monza in 1952 that sidelined him for much of the season. Yet he returned and continued to compete at the highest level. The sheer courage required to strap into a car knowing that death was a very real possibility cannot be overstated. Every lap demanded focus, bravery, and trust in one's instincts. When Fangio retired in 1958, he had won 24 of his 52 championship starts, a winning percentage of 46%. To this day, that remains the highest win rate of any driver with more than 10 starts. That statistic alone is staggering. By comparison, Schumacher's win rate is around 29%, Hamilton's around 28%, and Verstappen's, as of recent years, sits at 29%. Fangio's dominance then was not merely anecdotal, it was statistical. But again, numbers alone can be misleading if stripped of context. Fangio's era had shorter seasons, fewer races, and smaller grids. The competition structure was very different. Still, to win nearly half the races one entered is an extraordinary feat in any era. And perhaps the most unique element of Fangio's legacy lies in the sheer variety of his championship victories. He won with Alfa Romeo in 1951, with Maserati in 1957, with Ferrari in 1956, and with Mercedes in both 1954 and 1955. To conquer the sport with 4 different teams is an achievement no other driver has ever matched. Each of those cars had its own distinct character and engineering philosophy, and yet Fangio adapted seamlessly to all of them. In an era where the competitive order could shift dramatically from one season to the next, his ability to walk into a new team, understand the machinery, and immediately deliver a title-winning campaign stands as proof of his unparalleled adaptability. It was not just that he won often, it was that he could win anywhere, under any circumstance, with whoever built the fastest machine. So how should Fangio be remembered? On one hand, he benefited from racing in the formative years of Formula One, when the professionalization of the sport was still in its infancy. He was able to leverage his experience, his tactical mind, and his adaptability to secure opportunities in the best cars. But on the other hand, he consistently delivered when it mattered most, and he set standards that endured for decades. His adaptability across multiple teams, his intelligence in preserving machinery, his courage to compete in a deadly era, and his ability to deliver breathtaking performances like the 1957 Nurburgring race all combined to paint the picture of a driver who was not just good, but truly exceptional. For nearly 50 years, Fangio's 5 world championships were the benchmark. Drivers from subsequent generations, Clark, Stewart, Lauda, Prost, Senna, all pursued greatness in their own eras, but Fangio's record stood untouched until the dawn of the 21st century. Even after his record was surpassed, Fangio's reputation has not dimmed. He remains the measuring stick of the 1950s, the man who defined what greatness meant in the sport's earliest decade. Perhaps the ultimate testament to Fangio's legacy comes from his peers. Sterling Moss, a man widely respected as one of the finest drivers never to win a title, once said, "Fangio was the master, the greatest of them all. I was proud just to be his teammate. When those who raced against you, those who saw your skill up close, those who understood the nuances that statistics cannot convey, regard you as the greatest, it carries a weight no number can fully encapsulate." So, how good really was Juan Manuel Fangio? The answer is simple. He was not just good, he was foundational. He set the standard against which all subsequent champions would be measured. He was a man who combined tactical intelligence, mechanical sympathy, adaptability, and bravery into a complete package that was unmatched in his time. Even today, in the era of data, simulators, and ultra-professional teams, Fangio's name still resonates. He was the first true giant of Formula One, and his shadow still looms over the sport 7 decades later.